Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises to the Heavenly Father, Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rachahakodash. Double honors to the apostles, the elders at Great Millstone who rule well. Peace and salutations, as always, to the elect. And I wanted to get into some history, all right, that will help the believers to understand particular talking points that pop up in the New Testament that are used by Christians, okay, to promote a false narrative of what the Holy Scriptures are speaking of. All right, now, the first thing is you have to deal with the volume of the book. Okay, most people open up the Bible, okay, in the book of Matthew and think that they can get a clear understanding of what's written, all right, in the preceding books, okay, without a root, okay, in the history, okay, the Torah, okay, the you know, the wisdom, you know, the prophets, including the Apocrypha, which if you don't have an understanding of that history, there is no way you can understand the New Testament. Okay, you can't skip, all right, all of these hundreds of years of history and think that, you know, thousands of years of history and think that somehow you're going to have a root in the understanding of who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ is, what his role is, and what was happening when he came onto the scene. All right, now, what I notice is when you deal with these Christians, all right, they come from the standpoint that when the Messiah came onto the scene, he went to the Jews. Okay, now when you deal with the term Jews, you must understand what that means, and we'll get into all of that, all right, as we go through this lesson. And the Jews rejected him, all right, therefore salvation was open unto the heathen, all right, meaning actual heathen, all right, which that's not the truth, all right, and that's what we're going to tap into going into the history to make you aware of why it deals with the Jew first and then the Greek, which is linked to Gentile, all right. Now, let's go here to Romans 1:16. It says, this is Paul speaking, it says, "For I am not ashamed of the gospel of Hamashiach, for it is the power of God unto salvation to everyone that believeth," all right, through Yahweh Shai, all right, "to the Jew first and also to the Greek," all right. Now you have to ask yourself, why is it just the Greek? You know, why doesn't it ever say that to the Hamite or to the Moabite? All right, it clearly says Greek. Well, you would then have to understand the history of the Israelites prior, all right, to the Messiah coming on the scene, prior to Paul, so that you can gasp, all right, what's going on, or grasp. All right, so let's read it again. It says, "For I am not ashamed of the gospel of Hamashiach, for it is the power of God unto salvation to everyone that believeth," all right, to the Jew first and also to the Greek. All right, now let's deal with this term Jew. Okay, we know in the Hebrew it's Yahwadah. All right, now when you go into history, all right, let's go to the book of Daniel, the 7th chapter. Okay, the Bible is following, okay, the Israelites as they go throughout various different captivities. Okay, when you read Daniel, the 7th chapter, it gives you those different captivities. All right, the first is the Assyrian Babylonian Empire. Okay, here in Daniel, the 7th chapter, in the 4th verse. The second, all right, is the Medo-Persian Empire. Okay, the Medes and the Persians. Okay, after that, you have the Greeks in verse 6, Daniel 7:6. Okay, after the Greeks, okay, is the Roman Empire. All right, now there are particular things that happen to the chosen people, okay, the Israelites among these nations that is very, very key to understand. Now, when you deal with the term Jew in the Babylonian captivity, okay, Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, okay, were just labeled the Jews. All right. Now, when you go to Ezra, okay, as we were rebuilding the temple after that Babylonian captivity, all right, there was a decree by Cyrus that we can rebuild the temple and so forth. All right. Who was it? What tribes was it primarily, all right, that restored the temple? Okay, let's go to it real quick. Let's go to the book of Ezra 1 and 5. And this is the same Esdras that's in the Apocrypha. Okay, he goes into that history of what was happening around those times. So it says, the holy vessels restored. All right. Remember, the Babylonians on 3 different attempts finally, sacked the temple. Okay. And eventually, as we got out of the Babylonian captivity, we were able to rebuild it. So it says, then rose up the chief fathers of Judah and Benjamin and the priest and the Levites, okay, with all of them whose spirit God had raised to go build the house of the Lord, which is in Jerusalem. Okay, so remember, when we go to Daniel, the 7th chapter, okay, this is taking place, okay, in Daniel 7 and 5, the Medo-Persian Empire. Okay, but who did you have primarily? Okay, you had the fathers of Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. Okay, now remember, the other tribes had already left the Assyrian captivity and came over to the Americas. Okay, but that's another lesson for another time. All right, so you have to understand that it was primarily Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, all right, as you go through these various different captivities. After the Persian Empire came the Greeks and then the Romans that were primarily there. Okay, so when you go to this term, to the Jew, okay, the Jew is going to be primarily speaking of Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, all right, who were raised in the customs and who stuck to the traditions, okay, which is very important for you to understand. Okay, now when you go to the Jew, when you go into the Greek word, it's Eudaios, which ultimately it's Yahwadah in the Hebrew. Okay, but you have to understand, in the Babylonian captivity, those 3 tribes, okay, Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, were just called the Jews. So Jew can be speaking of Jew, which is the tribe of Judah, or it could be speaking of the 3 tribes, okay, which will remain in Jerusalem up into the time that the Messiah came onto the scene, okay, and stuck to the traditions. We're going to get into all of that, and that's very important in understanding the New Testament. So it says Jewish, which we know is no such thing, all right, but that's the term they use. Ish means pertaining to or to be like, okay, the counterfeit, all right. These are the real, we are the real Jews, okay. However, it says belonging to the Jewish nation, Jew as respect of birth, origin, religion, okay, religion. So let's go back here to Romans and let's deal with this. It says, for I am not ashamed of the gospel of Mashiach, for it is the power of God unto salvation to everyone that believeth on what? All right, the gospel through Yahawashi, salvation through Yahawashi. Okay, everyone that believeth, to the Jew first and also to the Greek, because what you're going to find out is that Yahawashi gathered from amongst the circumcision first, from amongst the Jews first, all right, and then at the time of Paul, everything was opened up as far as the Israelites who were not raised in the customs, as you can see the term here, Greek. So it says to the Jew first and also to the Greek. Now, when you look up this term Greek, Okay, real quick, let it load. It's Helen. Helen. See that right there? Helen. Now, Helen, to Hellenize, it says to adopt Greek ways in speech, to become Greek, to make Greek in character, culture, and civilization, which is contrary to the way the Jews lived, to the way the Israelites were supposed to live. Now, understanding that, okay, you have to understand the book of Maccabees. Now, again, in Daniel 7 and 5, it speaks of the Medo-Persian Empire. It was through those empires we rebuilt the temple, okay, and then the next empire in line is who? The Greeks. Now, if you take the Apocrypha away, you have no understanding of what took place with the Israelites as they went into the Greek captivity. It is vital that you understand that history as to understanding the New Testament. Now, let's go to what happened at the time of the Greeks, and we go into it all the time, so I'm not going to go super deep. All right, whereas you had Alexander, the Greek, all right, who is verified by historians as a real person. He's mentioned in the Bible. All right, but people doubt, who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ as a real person. Anyway, at the time of Alexander, they were conquering the Israelites, the Jews who were in Jerusalem. Alexander didn't bother them too much. Okay. But after Alexander died, he allowed the Jews to keep their customs. He allowed the Jews, which Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. You had a mingled few other tribes, but the Jews is primarily Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, all right, who were in Jerusalem. Now, remember, they rebuilt the temple, okay? They were sticking to the traditions. As a matter of fact, let's get a precept real quick. All right, this is Hosea 11 and 12. Ephraim, which is the northern kingdom, compasseth me about with lies, and the house of Israel with deceit. That's the northern kingdom. Remember, they were in the Assyrian captivity. Judah went into the Babylonian captivity. But according to prophecy, okay, the northern kingdom left the Assyrian captivity and came to a land where never mankind dwelt. And that word dwelt means to govern. And that's over here in the Americas. Now, nations had been here because we know Solomon sent his navy over. You have the Olmec heads, all right, but no nation governed in the northwestern hemisphere and so forth, all right? And that's where the Assyrian, Ephraim, who was in the Assyrian Empire, they eventually came to the Americas, and that's how Christopher Columbus, using the Apocrypha, knew that there were Israelites over here, all right? Anyway, that's a whole nother history, but it says what? Ephraim compasseth me about with lies, all right? After the split that happened with all 12 tribes after Solomon's sin, okay, because you got to remember, we were together as a nation, all right, under David and Solomon. Solomon forwarded David's throne for 40 years. After Solomon's fall, okay, this is where you get these various different captivities, okay, where we would be scattered, okay, and it starts with the Assyrian Babylonian, okay. So going back to where we were, give me 1 second here, all right. None of the kings of the northern kingdom did good. Maybe one of them did all right, but then he eventually went off. But when you deal with the kings of Judah who sat on the throne of David, out of the 19, I believe maybe 7 did good, with Josiah being the last. Okay, so there was still a remnant amongst the southern kingdom who did right. Okay, so let's read this again. Hosea 11 and 12. Ephraim compasseth me about with lies, and the house of Israel with deceit. But Judah yet ruleth with God and is faithful with the saints. Okay, and that was done for prophecy's sake, because at the time that Yahushua came onto the scene, as we'll show you, there were different sects and camps of Israelites, all right, who remained from what happened to us at the time of the Greeks. And that is a history you must understand. So at the time of the Greeks, Alexander allowed the Jews to keep their customs, but as you see here, he fell sick and he died. Okay, so after he died, a wicked root from amongst Alexander's generals named Antiochus, surnamed Epiphanes, okay, rose up. And when he rose up, he put hail on the Israelites. All right, verse 11, in those days went out of Israel wicked men who persuaded many, saying, let us go and make a covenant with the heathen that are round about us, for since we departed, we have had much sorrow. So this device pleased them well, and certain people were so forward that they went to the king, who gave them license to do after the ordinances of the heathen. Wherefore they built a place of exercise at Jerusalem according to the customs of the heathen, a gym. Gymnos means naked. They used to exercise naked. Again, we say this is the revival of Rome, but this is also the revival of the Greeks. That's why it was called the Greco-Roman Empire. Okay, so we see remnants of Greek culture born back as well through America, the NATO, and the EU. It says, whereupon they built a place of exercise at Jerusalem according to the customs of the heathen, which is something that ought not to happen. And they made themselves uncircumcised. And that's a terminology you're going to notice pop up, okay, in the New Testament. They made themselves uncircumcised. So if you notice in the New Testament, let's get Romans 2:25. You always see, okay, let's get Romans 2. Because, yeah, it's the physical circumcision of the penis that Jake stopped doing. But when you stop following the laws, you become uncircumcised. Okay, let's get the book of Romans 2:25. For circumcision verily profited if thou keep the law. So the circumcision were those who were what? Keeping the laws, raised in the traditions, which you're going to find out. John the Baptist, who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ. Peter, Andrew. These were all men from amongst the circumcision. Okay, we're going to get that so you can understand what the Bible was talking about. It's very key that you understand these concepts. So the circumcision, verily profit if thou keep the law, but if thou be a breaker of the law, thy circumcision is made uncircumcision. Okay, so it's not like you can have the skin of your penis cut off and then go put it back on. No, this is dealing with the keeping of the laws. All right, but when you go into history, you did have particular Israelites through the force of the Greeks, all right, sew back the skin on their penis. Okay, so you have circumcision. Let's look up this word circumcision. And it'll all tie itself together in just a minute.
Strong's G 4061. Peritame. Peritame.
Okay, circumcised. Act or rite of circumcision, day of the circumcision. All right, term used of the Jews. Christians gathered from among the Jews because you had, all right, what you're going to find out is that the first gathering of Yahushua was from amongst these Jews who were sticking to the traditions. There was various different sects or camps of Jews who were on the scene already, who knew who they were, who were sticking to the traditions, the natural branches. Yahushua gathered from amongst the circumcision first. All right, even when Paul came on the scene, he went to them first. This is why Yahushua and Paul were in the temples. They were preaching to those who were sticking to the traditions to get them to understand it was Yahushua who fulfilled these prophecies. And this is the high priest. The first covenant was broken, but we'll get to that in just a minute. It says of the state of circumcision, metaphorically, of the followers of Yahushua separated from the unclean multitude and truly consecrated to God. And who would that be primarily done by? Okay, that will be done by Judah. Okay, the northern kingdom were looked at as complete castaways. None of their kings after the split of Solomon did good. Okay, and then eventually they left. So the Jews looked at them as complete castaways. They're not a part of the fold anymore. They turned their backs on us. they're wicked, they're off. All right. But amongst Judah, you still had particular of those who were faithful, and that would be of Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, right? So let's go back here. So the circumcision, the extinction of passions, and the removal of spiritual impurity. So those of the circumcision stuck to the traditions, okay? As well as the physical circumcising of the penis, which is a part of our traditions. But if you be a breaker of the law, thy circumcision is made uncircumcision. Who are the uncircumcision?
Strong's G 203. Akrabustia. Akrabustia.
Okay. Having thy foreskin uncircumcised. All right. And what we're going to find out is that happened in the time of the Maccabees. Okay. It says a Gentile. Okay. You're an Israelite. But what are you doing differently from the circumcised? You're not following the traditions. A condition in which the corrupt desires rooted in the flesh were not yet extinct, meaning you were following after the heathen. You weren't being ruled or governed by the law. And you had many Israelites here in the time of Maccabees. Okay, you must understand what happened. Okay, what happened? Verse 15, and made themselves uncircumcised and forsook the holy covenant and joined themselves to the heathen and were sold to do mischief. Okay, now as you read this, keep going down. Okay. Let's see here. Yep, verse 44, for the king Antiochus has sent letters by messengers unto Jerusalem. Okay, now, who's in Jerusalem? The Jews. Judah, Benjamin, and Levi primarily. You had remnants of the other tribes, but we're focusing on them. It says, in the cities of Judah that they should follow the strange laws of the land. Okay, and forbid burnt offerings and sacrifice, which are our traditions, right? And drink offerings in the temple, that they should profane the Sabbath and festival days and pollute the sanctuary and holy people. Okay, that's what they wanted to do. See, this is how you pollute the holy seed. Okay, it's by taking on the traditions of the heathen and leaving off from your traditions. This is how you are polluted. Okay, anyway, set up altars and groves and chapels of idols and sacrifice swine's flesh and unclean beasts, that they should also leave their children uncircumcised and make their souls abominable in all manner of uncleanliness and profanation, to the end that they might forget the law and change the ordinances. This happened in what? The Greek captivity. Okay? So as we keep reading, okay, they wanted them to forget the law. You were Hellenized. Okay? They were putting you to death if you as a mother had your child circumcised, putting the fathers to death. If you wouldn't eat swine, they would put you to death. And you had particular of our forefathers and foremothers who said, you know what? We'll rather die than eat swine. We'll rather die than leave off from our customs. All right? Which was a mindset, okay, that would continue on down in the generations leading up into the time of Yahushua, which is why you have the Jew first, or the circumcision. Okay, let's keep going. Verse 61, and they hang the infants about their necks. This is what the Greeks did to our children, hanging them by the neck, showing you that these are the Edomites, which is a tradition they followed up until this time, and rifled their houses and slew them that had circumcised them. So it was a law passed that you couldn't circumcise your child. See? And like-minded ideologies, not in the form of the physical circumcision of the penis, but teaching your child that they're Israelite, all of these things like that are going to be outlawed here in this world. But anyway, it says, howbeit many in Israel were fully resolved and confirmed in themselves not to eat any unclean thing. See? And when you deal with Peter, remember when the vision came unto him, what did he say? Let's get that real quick. Because Peter was of the circumcision. These were Israelites that were raised in the customs. Now, when this vision came unto him that he thought meant to eat a particular unclean food, but that ain't what it meant. Listen to what Peter tells Yahushua. Acts 10:13, and there came a voice unto him, Rise, Peter, kill and eat. But Peter said, Not so, Lord, for I have never eaten anything that is common or unclean. Okay? Now, this is really speaking of the Gentiles, but he likened them to unclean beasts. All right? Now, what did Peter say? Let's read it in the NLT. Peter said what? Like Yahushua is going to raise Peter up and give him a vision while he's hungry to eat caterpillars and rats. No, that ain't what this is talking about. Peter said, Not so, Lord. I have never eaten things that our Jewish laws have declared impure and unclean. You see that? Peter was of the circumcision. All right. And what we're going to show you is as Yahushua first gathered his followers, it was from amongst the circumcision. Because when you go back to the Greek captivity, okay, there were some in Israel, all right, who did not bow the knee. Okay. Howbeit many in Israel, 1 Maccabees 1:62, were fully resolved and confirmed in themselves not to eat any unclean thing. Wherefore the rather to die, that they might not be defiled with meats, and that they might not profane the holy covenant. So then they died. So many of them died. Now, not all of them died, because let's go to the second chapter. This is 1 Maccabees 2. You have Mattathias, okay, who was the father, all right, of Judas Maccabees. Okay, that was Mattathias was the father. Okay, and he was a Levite. Okay, now going from the Babylonian captivity to the Medo-Persian captivity where we rebuilt the temple, we're now in the Greek captivity. Okay, and this is the history of what happened. Now, when you go down, we saw that a lot of Jake became uncircumcised and submitted. Okay, that's the uncircumcision you're going to find out that is written about in the New Testament. Okay, it ain't talking about actual heathen. It's speaking of Israelites who became Hellenized, Israelites who adopted Greek ways, customs, speech. Okay, Timothy's father was one of these. But guess what? Eventually, as the preaching of Yahushua went out, a lot of these Israelites repented. Okay, so let's go back to what happened in 1 Maccabees, the 2nd chapter. Okay, what was the mindset of Mattathias and his children? Let's see here. It's a good chapter, but I'll just start at verse 19. Then Mattathias answered and spake with a loud voice, though all the nations that are under the king's dominion obey him, okay, Antiochus, that demon Edomite, and fall away, see, the falling away, which goes back to the Nephilim, the sons of God who fell away by what? Being mingled among the heathen and learning their works. See? And fall away every one from the religion of their fathers. Now, when we go back to this term Jew or Judah, okay, Jew in the New Testament, speaking of Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, what does it say? Jewish belonging to what? Nation, Jewish as respects of birth, origin, or religion. Which is what? What is the religion of the Jews? The law, statutes, and commandments. Not no damn Judaism. The law, statutes, and commandments. Okay, so let's read what Mattathias says again. Then Mattathias answered and said with a loud voice, though all the nations that are under the king's dominion obey him, and fall away every one from the religion of their fathers, okay, and give consent to his commandments, and it was many nations, that were taken down, right? But the scriptures, let's get it real quick. It's dealing with the chosen seed. Let's go to chapter 1 again. Let's see here. Let's type in religion. Yep. Yeah. We just read it. Verse 41. Moreover, King Antiochus wrote to his whole kingdom, okay, which there were other nations, that they should all be one people, new world order, and that everyone should leave the laws of his fathers. So all the heathen agreed according to the commandment of the king. Yea, many also of the Israelites consented to his religion and sacrificed to idols and profaned the Sabbath. Now, what happens in the law when you profane the Sabbath? You're cut off. See, if you're not circumcised, you're cut off. Okay, so you got to remember, these Jews who were sticking to the traditions, as we're going to show you, they had a very, very evil outlook. They were very angry with the Israelites who submitted and didn't circumcise their children. They looked at them as they're not even Israelites anymore, which was a mindset that continued on to the time that Yahushua was on the scene and the time that Paul was sent, okay, to preach to the uncircumcision, the Israelites who were raised in the Greco-Roman fashion, who eventually woke up. There was still we'll show you. Let's keep reading. It says, Mattathias spake with a loud voice, though all the nations that are under the king's dominion obey him and fall away every one from the religion of their fathers and give consent unto his commandments, yet will I and my sons and my brethren walk in the covenant of our fathers. God forbid that we should forsake the law in the ordinances. See, we ain't going to go off. We ain't going to bow the knee. Okay? We will not hearken to the king's words to go from our religion, the law, statutes, and commandments, either on the right hand or on the left, which takes you to a precept. All right? Don't go left or right. Keep straight on the path, right? Now, when they had left speaking these words, there came one of the Jews in the sight of all to sacrifice on the altar, which is at Modin, according to the king's commandment. Now, what was the king commanding the Jews to sacrifice? Swine. We just read that in the prior chapter. Okay, so Mattathias, a faithful one, when he returns to Jerusalem with his sons, they're astonished at what they see. They're like, wait a minute. Which things when Mattathias saw, he was inflamed with zeal, and his reins trembled, neither could he forbear to show his anger according to judgment, wherefore he ran and slew him upon the altar. See, he slew this particular Israelite Jew, okay, priest, who followed Antiochus' commandment. Mattathias saw him and put his ass to death. Okay, and this is going to be a mindset of those who stuck to the traditions, okay, that they're going to look at these particular Israelites who fell away throughout the course of the New Testament, which is why you have to understand the friction between the Jews and the Gentiles coming back in. Okay, the Gentiles were looked at as castaways, sellouts, no people. Okay, also the king's commissioners who compelled men to sacrifice, he killed at the time, and the altar he pulled down. So they were putting these particular Israelites to death who sold out. Thus dealt he zealously for the law of God, as Phinehas did unto Zambri, the son of Salom. This goes back into our history. And Mattathias cried throughout the city with a loud voice, saying, whosoever is zealous of the law and maintaineth the covenant, let him follow me. So he and his sons fled into the mountains and left all that ever they had in the city. All right. Then many that sought after justice and judgment went down into the wilderness to dwell therein, both they and their children and their wives and their cattle, because of afflictions increased sore upon them. So they rode out into the, to the mountains to get away and keep the laws. All right. But you have to understand, after the Maccabean Empire, eventually there's a lot of history that you have to, brush up on and know about in order to understand the particular camps. Okay, because after the the Greek Empire, which is the leopard here in Daniel 7 and 6, what empire comes next? The Romans, the fourth beast, the Roman Empire. Okay? The fourth beast, dreadful and terrible and strong exceedingly. Okay? They came and devoured and break in pieces. So you have to understand, which we ain't going to get into all the technicalities of the history. There was a mindset of Jews, okay, who stuck religiously to the laws and eventually survived, okay, and unto the time of Yahushua. All right, this is why you have these different sects. Now it says the sects of Judaism. No, it's the sects of the Jews during the time of the Messiah. This is where you get the scribes, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the Essenes. All of these various different people are Israelites who stuck to the traditions. You can also look up the Hasmonean dynasty. Okay? The Hasmonean dynasty, okay, just to get a brief understanding, under the Hasmonean dynasty, which lasted about 80 years, the kingdom regained boundaries not far short of Solomon's realm. Political, all right, consolidation under Jewish rule was attained, and Jewish life flourished. Under the Hasmonean dynasty, all right, there were Jews who stuck to the traditions and customs. Okay? And this was pretty much after the Greek Empire, when you go into it. Okay? You had particular Israelites who stuck to the traditions, and that is the circumcision you hear about. Now, when you go to this article, we're not going to read through it all, but these are the different sects or camps, because let's look up the term sect in the Holy Scriptures. Because people don't understand, this is what we stem from. All right? The good and the bad. This is a part of our history. Okay? Look, Acts 5 and 17. Then the high priest rose up and all that were with him, which is of the sect of the Sadducees, and were filled with indignation. Why? Because these men were preaching Yahushua. All right? A lot of these were mad, but let's not go that far first. Let's go to the term sect. Okay? A sect.
Strong's G 139. Hyresis. Hyresis.
All right. Act of taking capture, storming the city, choosing that which is chosen. A body of men following their own tenets. Sect or party. These were camps. And the Christians or followers of Yahushua were a camp. Okay. Dissensions arising from a diversity of opinion and aims. So there were camps on the scene when Yahushua came on the scene. And these were people who stuck to the traditions, all right, but they started to be separate and have particular opinions and this and that. Okay? Right here, let's just jump to the point. Let's see here. Let's just jump to a particular point. Although there were many sects of the Jews within Palestine, okay, and it's called Palestine, that goes back to that term Philistine, because at one point the Philistines controlled that land. Okay, it says, although there were many sects of the Jews within Palestine during the 1st century AD, and shortly before, there were 4 major ones: the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the Essenes, and the Zealots, which the Sicarii were of the Zealots. They were Jews, they were Israelites who were zealous after the law, stuck to the traditions, and they fought for what? A relevance of the Jews, a government of the Jews. Okay, remember we read Ephraim is compassed with lies and Israel with idols, but Judah ruleth faithful with the saints. There were still some in Judah, as we're reading about, that stuck to the traditions, the circumcision. Okay, and this is why you get to the Jew first and then to the Greek, because we're going to show you what that means. Okay, it says, but even during the time when Hamashiach walked the earth, Yahweh, when we say Hamashiach, that's the Ha-Mashiach, Messiah, speaking of who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ, because we don't deal with the term Christ, which Christos or Christ just means anointed, all right? But, you know, we want to be separate to the best of our ability from this world, because Christ is the God of these heathen as well. There was many Christ, but there's only one Yahweh Shai. All right, Serapis Christus was known as a Christ. Okay, many of these gods were known as Christ. So we want to be careful we're not pushing a particular vibration. Who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ is Hamashiach Yahweh Shai, the Messiah, who's going to bring the nation of Israel back to the Father. Okay, it says, but even during the time when Hamashiach walked the earth, there were minor sects, okay, other camps, such as new and growing sect of Judeo-Christians and the Sakari and splinter rebel groups of the Zealots. So there were many camps on the scene. It says, while there were 4 primary sects, that does not mean they are overly large in number of participants. Keep in mind that there were a lot less people on earth at that time, and sects necessarily maintain their communities, all right, in and around larger cities such as Jerusalem. All right, what was in Jerusalem? The temple. Now, under the Roman Empire, okay, Judea was a province of Rome. Okay, so it wasn't so much that we were, all right, we were captives, right? But they still allowed us to run our government as long as we paid a tribute to them. Okay, and many of the priests who were dealing in the temple started to sell out, got weak, all right, and thus, you know, the birth of the Messiah to gather from amongst, all right, the circumcision. But we'll get to that in just a minute. All right, let's keep reading. Let's go to the point. So when you read about these particular sects, okay, and I mean, this is a lot to read. You know, I don't want to read through it all because it's going to take a lot of time. But you must, you know, understand that there were Israelites who stuck to the tradition stemming from the Maccabean revolt. Okay, there was a lot of history things that happened. You have John Hyrcanus, who, you know, for political reasons, you know, forced Edomites, okay, to become Jews under the guise that they participated in the army to fight. There's many histories and things you must understand. However, the overall understanding from this is, look, the circumcision stem, all right, from the Maccabean revolt, who were what? Like, we ain't bowing to the laws of these heathens. And they stuck to the traditions, right? Now, man. In Palestine, during the time of Yahushai's career, Jerusalem and the outlying vicinity was a part of the Roman Empire, and a Roman perfect with his army was in charge. The Roman perfect was the area that was Pontius Pilate, and from nearby, the Gentile city of Caesarea. All right, perfects acted as an overseer from a distance, but on a day-to-day basis, they relied upon local leaders and Jewish high priests to govern social conduct in Jerusalem. So ultimately, we were under the rule of the Romans, and then you have particular sects like we shouldn't be under the rule of the Romans. We need to rebel. We need to fight. You know, when Yahushua came, they were like, look, we need to take these people down, yada, yada, yada. All right. So that's history. You can brush up on knowing the ins and outs. All right. But, you know, you jump and you see these particular terms pop up during Yahushai's walk. The Sadducees, okay? They showed their hatred towards Yahushai and taking part of his condemnation. It was these niggas, okay, who didn't accept him, because the common understanding that a Christian pushes is that when Yahushai came to his own, they all forsook him. And that's a damn lie. Many of the circumcision forsook him, but many of them followed him too, which is where you have Peter, Andrew, James. Okay, these were all, okay, Israelites who were raised in the customs. So Yahushua gathered from amongst the Jews first, and we'll get to that in just a minute. So you had the Sadducees, okay, which they were very, very zealous after the law. They created laws out of laws, okay, and these were the men, all right. You know, the average Israelite looked up to these men, like these were the ones. This was the way, all right, and they were primarily stuck in that first covenant, okay. It said these were the non-religious free thinkers or skeptical people of the time. They do not appear as a separate sect after the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD, basically. It says, from their first appearance in history as a distinct sect, the Sadducees were the devoted adherents of Greek government leaders, sellouts. All right. But they, you know, over the time, they stuck to particular tradition. It says, basically, they were a political party devoted to obtaining power within the Greek governance. Okay, usually they were rich upper class and considered themselves as righteous in opposition to the Pharisees, the common class. Also, the Sadducees were largely indifferent to religion except in so as far as it were matter of custom. Their interest was for a purely secular state, and they were satisfied with their present situation. They were satisfied with being under the Romans, basically, since it permitted them to live in comfort and grandeur. So these particular Israelites, okay, were like your IUIC of the time. They want to be comfortable. You know, they don't mind being under, you know, Babylon. All right. As long as we could keep, you know, our traditions and laws, we good. Okay. They're uppity. You know, they look down on Jake, you know, all of that, man. It said it was a mixed group of Sadducees and Pharisees that went out to meet John the Baptist in the banks of the River Jordan. Okay. That was when John confronted him. Okay. And we'll get into that. Then you have the Pharisees. Okay. While the Sadducees were more secular than religious, the Pharisees were just the opposite. This was the most inflexible sect of the Jew religion, all right, having been brought up according to the strict manner of the law. They and the scribes had similar beliefs and were often found together, and it gives you the scriptures, okay? These are the people who popped up constantly bothering Yahushai, okay? Let's see here. They believed in angels. They were very outwardly based. You know, you had to have on the long robe with the fringes and the phylacteries and this and that. Okay. They were very strict in the law. Let's see here. This sect was the first to assume an attitude of hostility to criticize Yahushai, and they continued this attitude although his ministry had to end. Let's see here. Although the Bible indicates the Sadducees were the most prominent during the last days of his life, the Pharisaic scribes also took part in his trial and condemnation. Probably to the most well-known Pharisee was Paul the Apostle, all right? See, he was raised as a Pharisee, all right? But he was used as a vessel after the Lord blinded him and knocked him off his horse to go preach to the Gentiles, all right? We'll get that a little later on. Then you have the Essenes, all right? They were like the monks, man. They were very separate from the world. I forget the name of it today. They would pretty much be your modern day. I forget the name of it, but You know, they don't, they're not of the world. They just stick to themselves. All right. When you go into it, to get into their camp, you had to wait, you know, like 2 years before you even considered. Okay. The Essenes were an obscure sect, not directly mentioned in the scripture, although they may have been referred to in Matthew 19. They practiced self-denial as a scriptural discipline, and many shunned marriage and to devote more time to prayer. Individuals did not own any private property, but shared all their possessions with others in the community. They ate simple meals, wore simple clothes, and avoided the show of luxury. All right, you can read more about them. Then you have the Zealots. Okay, they wanted to take down Rome. Okay, and the thing is, you have Israelites from all of these different sects who eventually followed Yahushua. And that's the Jew first. That's the circumcision. Now let's get the book of Matthew. Okay, because what did it all start with? John the Baptist. Now, where did John come from? He came from a family. Let's get Luke, the first chapter, that was in the temple. Okay? Real quick, Luke 1 and 5. There was in the days of Herod, the king of Judea. Okay, Judea was a province of Rome. Herod labeled himself the king of the Jews, right? A certain priest named Zacharias of the course of Abiah. Okay, so these were Israelites. They had particular records. They knew, you know, who their fathers were. Okay, and they were sticking to the laws. And his wife's was one of the daughters of Aaron, and her name was Elizabeth. Okay, so John came from a family, okay, who was in the priest. Okay, John, when he was born, he was circumcised the 8th day, just like Yahushua. These were Jews of the circumcision. Okay, as a matter of fact, let's see if we can find that part. Yep. When John was born, what? He was circumcised the 8th day. All right, and they were going to call him after his father Zacharias, but eventually his name was changed to John. But John was born to a family who, after the Greek captivity, entered into the Roman captivity, stuck to the traditions, right? And what did John do? He saw the wickedness going on in the temple, so he separated from the temple, all right, and went where? To the wilderness, which is a prophecy in Isaiah, the 40th chapter, okay, or 41, around there. So the preaching of John the Baptist. In those days came John the Baptist preaching in the wilderness of Judea. See? He left. Now, what's Judea? Let's look up Judea. He left the temple. He separated after he saw all of the evil going on. Okay? And what is that? Judea is pretty much Yahawada. Okay? The region where the Jews dwelt in Jerusalem. In a broader sense, referring to all Palestine, Israel, right? So what John did was he separated from the corruption of the temple, and in those days came John the Baptist preaching in the wilderness of Judea, saying, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Okay? For this, in the kingdom of heaven, is the knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, or that comes through the Holy Spirit. Okay, it says, for this is he that was spoken of, all right, by Isaiah, saying, the voice of one crying in the wilderness, prepare ye the way of the Lord, and make his paths right. Okay, and if you want to know where that's at, that's in Isaiah, the 40th chapter. Okay, also in Malachi, okay, that he will come. This is Elijah the prophet, okay, returning. It says, and this same John had his raiment of camel's hair and a leathern girdle about his loins, and his meat was locusts and wild honey. Then, okay, went out to him in Jerusalem and all Judea and all the region round about Jordan, and were baptized, okay, of him in Jordan, confessing their sins. So these were Israelites, Jews, okay, who heard the message of John and said, you know what? I believe on what he, I'm going to follow him. Right? Still the circumcision. It says, but when he saw many of the Pharisees and Sadducees come to his baptism, he said unto them, O generation of vipers, who warned you to flee from the wrath to come? He knew that they weren't right. Okay? Because these weren't going to accept Yahushua. All right? But many of the circumcision, many of the Jews did. So the Christian narrative is that the Jews all rejected Jesus and then it was opened up to the actual Gentiles. No. That's not what happened. So he says what? Bring forth therefore fruits meet for repentance. And think not to say unto yourselves, we have Abraham our father, for I say unto you that God is able to raise up these stones, okay, up to the children of Abraham, right? It says, and now also the axe is laid unto the root of the trees. Therefore, every tree which bringeth not forth good fruit is hewn down and cast into the fire. These are the natural branches in Romans 11 that were cast off. The natural branches are the Jews. Okay, let's get that real quick. That were chopped off. Okay? Romans 11 and 21. For if God spared not the natural branches, take heed lest he also spare not thee. All right. And this is speaking of those who grew up keeping the laws, who rejected Yahushua. Okay. Natural branches. Natural is physis. Okay. The nature of things, the force, the laws, the order of nature. Okay, yada, 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 the birth, because they were born literally in Judea, Israel, but they kept the laws. Okay, and then you have those who weren't raised as natural branches, who were grafted in, but they're still olives, they're still Israelites. So the natural branches that were hewn down and cut off from the tree were the Jews, okay, of these particular sects. Okay, what do you think John is saying here? Okay, let's read this in the NLT, Matthew 3 and 10. Even now the axe of God's judgment is poised, ready to sever, okay, the root of the trees. Yes, every tree that does not produce good fruit will be chopped down and thrown into the fire. All right. So they thought because they were of the circumcision, they stuck to the traditions and this and that, and they were still stuck in that first covenant. The preaching of a Messiah to come, all right, although some of them understood prophecy, they wasn't with it. Okay? Verse 11, I indeed baptize you with water unto repentance, which goes into a custom of the high priest and everything. But he that cometh after me is mightier than I, whose shoes I am not worthy to bear. He shall baptize you with the Holy Spirit and with fire. So there you go. I mean, you could keep reading. All right, then John baptizes Yahushua. Okay, and Yahushua starts his ministry. Okay, but these were Jews in the region of Judea, in a region all around about Jordan, coming to John as he went to preach in the wilderness. Okay, and what were they doing? They were confessing their sins. Okay, now, amongst Yahushua's first converts, okay, this is John 1 and 35. It says, again, the next day after John stood and two of his disciples, okay, John the Baptist, okay, and looking upon Yahushua as he walked, he said, behold, the Lamb of God. And the two disciples heard him speak, and they followed Yahushua. Okay, so John was standing with his disciples because he had his ministry, he had his course. And when he saw Yahweh Shai, he was like, look, there go the Lamb of God. That's the one I'm talking about. And the two disciples heard John, and they start following Yahweh Shai. Then Yahweh Shai turned and saw them following and said unto them, what seek ye? They said unto him, Rabbi, which is interpreted master, where dwellest thou? Where you live? We coming with you. Then said he unto them, come and see. They came and saw where he dwelt and abode with him that day, for it was about the 10th hour. One of the two which heard John speak and followed him was Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. Now, when you go into other different scriptures, you find out that Peter himself also was a follower of John. Okay, so as John was preaching of the Messiah when he came, particular of the men that were following John followed Yahweh Shai. Remember, these are all Jews of the circumcision who were raised in the customs. Okay? I'm just giving you a very abridged version of everything that happened so that you can understand these terms: Jew, Greek, Gentile, circumcision, uncircumcised. Okay? One of the two which heard John speak and followed him was Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, and both of these eventually became disciples, with Peter being the first. He findeth his own brother Simon, which is Peter, and said unto him, we have found the Messiah, which is being interpreted the anointed one, okay, which he was prophesied to come. When you go in prophecy, a child was supposed to be born, right? So they knew, okay, this is him by the prophecy of John. It says, and they brought him to Yahweh Shai, and when Yahweh Shai saw him, he said, thou art Simon, the son of Jonah. Thou shalt be called Cephas, which is Peter, rock, Petra, Peter, which is by interpretation a stone. The day following Yahweh Shai will go forth. The day following Yahweh Shai will go forth into Galilee, and he findeth Philip and said unto him, follow me. So Yahweh Shai was going into these regions in Jerusalem and round about, gathering from the circumcision. These of the Jews and of the circumcision took heed. They followed Yahweh Shai. Okay? And so forth. And you keep reading. All right. Now, as he was, gathering his disciples, you got to understand there were others that were like, hell nah, this ain't the Messiah. Okay? And you can find that as you keep reading in these chapters. He's doing all these miracles. Okay? And what did he do? And when the Jews' Passover was at hand, Yahweh Shai went up to Jerusalem and found in the temple those that sold oxen and sheep and doves and changers of money sitting. And when he had made a scourge of small cords, he drove them all out of the temple and the sheep and of the oxen, and poured out the money chargers and overthrew the tables. Why? Because the temple had become polluted. This is why John left. Okay? Just as you have people today saying One West became polluted, but the truth still came from there, and it's still a part of our history as to how this word has been spread in these times, because particular men left that church and set up and start preaching in what will kind of be like a wilderness. Okay? And for 7 years, the apostles were preaching, and then, with no fruit. Then eventually in 2007, they put the videos on YouTube, and boom, you have this great awakening. All right, which I was blessed to be a part of. Anyway, so basically, as you can see, Yahweh Shai first went amongst the Jews. Okay, he's cursing some of them out, some of them followed him. All right, the circumcision, those who was sticking to the laws in the temple and so forth. All right, and the Jews had a problem with his message because he was telling them this temple is going to be destroyed, yada, yada, yada. Let's go to Matthew 10 and 16. As Yahweh Shai is speaking to his disciples about their ministry and what they're getting ready to go through. Okay, Matthew 10, because he gathered his disciples here. Okay. The first is Simon, Peter, Andrew. All of these Israelites were Israelites who was born in the customs of the circumcision. It's just of the Jew first. The tents of Judah would have to be raised up first. That's prophecy, okay? That's order. But this is the hard road he told before them. Behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. Be ye therefore wise as serpent and harmless as doves. And beware of men, for they will deliver you up to the councils and will scourge you in their synagogues. Okay? Synagogues of Satan. And this is Jake. And ye shall be brought before governors and kings, all right, for my name's sake, for a testimony against them and against the Gentiles, the actual heathen. All right, but he's just going unto them ultimately what was going to happen to them, because the first gathering was from amongst the region of Judea, Jerusalem, Israel. Okay, but you had a bunch of damn wolves there who, as they were preaching the message of Yahushua, were persecuting these men. Okay, so not all of the Jews, because this is what the Christians will say. John 1, let's see here. John 1 and 10. He was in the world, and the world was made by him, and the world knew him not. He came unto his own, and his own received him not. Okay, his own is the circumcision. As Yahushua himself was circumcised on the 8th day, right? He was born to a family that were sticking to the law of Moses. As a matter of fact, when you get Luke, the 2nd chapter, remember, his father and his mother, all right, was from the loins and lineage of David. All right, but let's see here. Yep. When Yahushua was presented at the temple, okay, and for him to even be at the temple, in the temple, walk into the temple, they would have had to know his father was from Judah, but that's a whole nother lesson. Anyway, it says, and when the 8 days were accomplished according to the circumcision of the child, his name was called Yahushua. Okay, and when the days of purification according to the law of Moses, so as you can see, his family were keeping the laws. So yeah, a lot of his own refused him, okay, and didn't receive him, but some did. Okay, this is a narrative the Christian church runs with. All of the Jews denied Jesus, and then it was opened up to the heathen. No. So let's go back to Matthew. Okay, so we got that. Yahushua begins his ministry. All right, now what did it start with? John preaching in the wilderness. Then he had to be baptized by John. Then he started his ministry and started to gather. Okay, it says, now when Yahushua had heard that John was cast into prison, because John was causing ruckus, eventually he was cast into prison. Okay, he departed into Galilee. And leaving Nazareth, he came and dwelt at Capernaum, which is on the sea coast in the borders of Zebulun and Naphtali. Okay, and you had Jake, okay, Jews there, as well as some of the, scattered northern kingdom who stayed back. It says that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by the prophet Isaiah, saying, the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali by the way of the sea, by the Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles. The people which sat in darkness saw great light. Okay, and to them which sat in the region and the shadow of death, light is sprung up. All right, because ultimately Yahushua finally was born and came. And this was our way back to the Father. Okay. And you had many Israelites, some who were sticking to the traditions and some who weren't, that were ultimately, it was no way back. The way back came through Yahushua, man. So after he began to preach and saying the kingdom of heaven is at hand, all right, we know his first disciples were gathered, Peter, Andrew, his brother, who were following John the Baptist. Okay, and they followed him, and he said, I will make you fishers of men. Okay, then he got other followers. These were all gathered from amongst the Jew first. Okay, and what are we going into? Romans 1 and 16, for I am not ashamed of the gospel of Mashiach, for it is the power of God unto salvation to everyone that believeth. Now, is this everyone in the whole world? No, everyone amongst the house of Israel, of the Jew first, all right, and also of the Greek, the castaway, the heathen, which is Israelites who were raised in those customs. So you have to know this history, all right? Now, for the sake of time, I'm going to just get a few more things and wrap it up because it's so much history. But again, we have to abridge it, just as Moses, when he wrote the Torah and the Bible, period, is a very abridged version of everything that happened. Okay? So a lot of them left off because they were fishermen and followed Yahushai. In verse 23, and Yahushai went about all Galilee teaching in their synagogue. See, he was teaching amongst the Jew first. Okay? And preaching the gospel of the kingdom and healing all manner of sickness and all manner of disease among the people. And as he was healing these people, the Jews were like, who in the hell are you to be able to heal? Who are you to forgive sins? Okay? So Yahushua was preparing his followers like, look, these are the people that are going to be down with you. Okay? And these are the people who are going to be against you. And the ones that are going to be down are pretty much the castaways, the maimed, the halted, the blind, those who by that first covenant standard were rejected. Okay? It's a lot, man. It says, and his fame went out. Okay? So he went throughout Galilee, you know, teaching in their synagogues, okay, which were amongst the Jews, preaching the gospel of the kingdom, healing all manner of sickness and all manner of disease among the people. And his fame went all throughout Syria, okay, and them niggas got jealous, okay. And they brought unto him all the sick that were taken with diverse diseases and torments, okay, and those which were possessed with devils, and those which were lunatic, and those which had the palsy, and he healed them. And there followed him great multitudes of people from Galilee and from Decapolis. I think this is a city where 10 regions were, 10 cities. It says, and from Jerusalem and from Judea and beyond Jordan. Okay, so his first following, okay, came from amongst these regions where the Jews dwelt, those who were raised in the customs. Now, to make a long story short, as Yahushai is preaching, we know eventually, all right, those from amongst the circumcision who rejected him, you know, eventually they have him crucified, right? All right, they're plotting to kill him. Okay, and who was it that was doing that? The scribes, the Pharisees, those of the circumcision who rejected him. They used their, you know, ties to the Roman system to have our Lord and Savior crucified. Okay, who was it that did that? The high priest, the chief priest. Okay, that was the ones who were behind having our Lord and Savior crucified, but it was prophecy. Those were the ones who rejected him. Not all of the priest and everything rejected him. Okay, now as Yahushua dies, you know, he's resurrected and all of that. Eventually, the followers of Yahushua, Peter and all of them, they go preaching. All right, and that's where you get the book of Acts. Okay, this is the Acts of the Apostles. Okay, after Yahushua eventually went back to the right-hand side, you know, a lot of people thought that was the kingdom was coming, but no, it was more prophecy. Okay, you can read that. Then you go through the books of Acts, and okay, it's a lot happening. All right, as even Vocab brought out Acts, the 2nd chapter, which is the day of Pentecost. All right, where the Jews were by law, okay, to come to Jerusalem. All right, the 50th day after the Pentecost. All right, now, just a side note, okay, you had all of these Jews from these different areas, and you had proselytes, okay, which proselyte means what? A newcomer. We brought that out in yesterday's lesson. We ain't got to go all the way into it, but you have to understand all right, those of the circumcision as well went out, and they were as Jake was waking up, okay, as let's get that in the book of Matthew 23, because a proselyte is a new covenant, a newcomer, Salakia, one who has come over from a Gentile religion to what? Following the religion of the Jews, which is the laws. Okay? So you had newly converts who were following these scribes and Pharisees, which is why Yahweh Shai said this. Let's see here. Yep. Matthew 25:13. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you can pass sea and land to make one a proselyte. So as they saw the followers of Yahweh Shai going out, they were going and try to set up their churches, telling Jake, you had to be circumcised after the manner of Moses. You had to be perfect in the law. Okay, so they were gathering people too. Okay, saying that you got to be circumcised after the manner of Moses. You got to be perfect in the law. Yahweh Shai said, for you can pass sea and land to make one a proselyte, a newcomer. Okay, and when he is made, you make him twofold more into the child of hell than yourselves. These proselytes are Israelites, man. Okay, they just weren't born into the customs. Okay, so as you had a lot of Israelites waking up through the preaching of the disciples, okay, these wicked scribes and Pharisees went out and started gathering men as well, and going amongst the churches and persecuting the churches. So this is what you read about in the Acts of the apostles. You know, the apostles healing people, going to jail. Okay, the Peter and John arrested. The different things that were happening during famines. Okay, they choose 7. They were setting up order amongst their church, because remember, these were a camp. They were looked at as a camp. As a matter of fact, real quick, let's get speaking of Paul after he was converted. Okay, this is what they said of him. For we have found this man a pestilent fellow and a mover of sedition among the Jews throughout the world, and a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes. See, a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes, that's where Yahweh Shai was, raised at. Okay, but this was the mindset of Paul. Okay, a ringleader of the sect. Again, that word sect. So these were camps. Anybody who's saying camps ain't a part of our history, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. Okay, a body of men following their own tenets. All right, and you have camps today. So the followers of Yahweh Shai were looked at as a camp too. And when you go into the Roman traditions and history, they called the Israelites a camp, a sect. We were always a camp. The first camp was the gathering at Jerusalem. Jerusalem is a camp. Anyway, when you go through the book of Acts, it's giving you the Acts of the Apostles, which were, the camp, all right, that originally followed Yahweh Shai. After his death and resurrection, they kept preaching. They had to preach his resurrection, all right, and as you can see, there was particular things going on amongst the church, all right, as you can see in chapter 6, after the number of the disciples were multiplied, there arose a murmuring amongst the Grecians against the Hebrews because of their widows were neglected in the daily ministration. Now, when you see this word Grecian, okay, basically these were Greek-speaking Jews, okay, and they were still looked down upon by, all right, the Jews who were born in Judea and all of that. Because if you even knew Greek, you were looked down upon. If you spoke Greek, you were looked down upon. Okay, Hellenistes, Hellenist, one who imitates the manners and customs of the worship of the Greeks. In the New Testament, this is speaking of Jews born in foreign lands and speaking Greek. So these were people of the circumcision, all right, but they were born amongst the Greeks and taught and spoke Greek. Now remember, in Acts 2, you had Jews from all of these various different nations who came together, okay, of the circumcision. But anyway, as you keep reading, Stephen comes, you know that history. Okay, Saul is persecuting the church. Okay, and eventually Saul is converted. Okay, his name was changed to Paul, and he becomes a vessel to go and preach salvation to the Gentiles. Okay, and you have to read these chapters to get that understanding. I'm giving you a short, abridged version. All right, and the welcoming in of the Gentiles, the Israelite foreigners from among the heathen, okay, starts with Cornelius, who was a devout man who gave alms. So just as we're out preaching, right? Okay, or as the apostles were out preaching, some of us saw them, and we may have went and brought them water, or you see a camp, you start to give alms, you start to listen. Okay, but remember, these are Israelites who are leaving off from heathen customs. Remember, to the Jew first, and then to the Greek or the Hellenist, those who were practicing the customs of the Greeks. Okay, so then it was open. Okay, and Paul, as a matter of fact, let's get Galatians. Then we'll read a little bit out of Acts 10 and we'll close it out. I'll just do a part 2 because I don't want it to, the point was made, but I wanted to make a few more points because now we have to deal with the coming in of the Gentiles, which that can be a lesson within itself. But when you get Galatians 2, speaking on the council at Jerusalem that led to all of these letters being wrote by Paul. Okay, let's see what Paul, because Paul was a Pharisee. Remember that. He was raised strict and hardcore to the law and persecuted the church who was preaching Jesus, or Yahushua. But then guess what? He was knocked off his horse and used by the Lord. Galatians 2:7, but contrariwise, when they saw that the gospel of the uncircumcision was committed unto me, Paul, as the gospel of the circumcision was unto Peter. And as we showed you, all right, it was preached amongst the Jews first. All right, and now starting with Paul, all right, they're going to start traveling and going amongst these churches who are waking up in these different regions where Israelite foreigners, heathen, all right, were waking up. Okay, and when James, Cephas, and John, who seemed to be pillars, perceived that grace was given unto me, they gave me and Barnabas the right hands of fellowship, that we should go unto the heathen, and they unto the circumcision. So the heathen are likened unto the uncircumcision. All right, now there's a lot of history, all right, as we get into Acts 9 and 10 that it's going to take some time. So what I'll do is I'll leave this part off as part 1, and I'll come back at some point through the Holy Spirit, if the Lord allows, to break down the aspect of to the Gentile, because, to the Jew first, that's a concept in the scriptures. But what happens is you have Christians who use that to the Jew first and also to the Gentile as a means to say, well, the Jews rejected the Messiah, so it was opened up to heathen. Nah, that's not what that means. So what we'll do is come back and edify, with the conversion of Saul, okay, and the bringing in of the Gentiles and the church, churches being raised up amongst these heathen, all right, these Israelites among the heathen that were turned unto the Heavenly Father. So I'll leave that where it is. Hopefully you're edified. I don't want to make it too long. Shalom.